very much. Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to the full council meeting of 28th of June. So, although, colleagues, this is the end of term for us, it is the end of an era in the history of our council. And I think it's important to say, with grateful thanks, and to acknowledge the work and achievements of our Chief Executive, Lorraine McMillan, on her retirement, and her attendance here tonight at her last full council meeting as Chief Executive, but more of that later. So now on to the business of tonight's meeting. So can I remind everybody that the meeting is hybrid, and we have a number of participants joining the meeting remotely. That is including 4 councillors, Councillors Cunningham, Convery, Merrick and MacDonald. The meeting is being streamed live and stored for later viewing. I can suspend the webcast if I think it will affect the proceedings, and a recording of the meeting will be published on the Council's YouTube channel. So, rules for participation: any motions or amendments need to be moved and seconded as usual, and all votes may need to be by roll call. Well, they will be because we have members attending remotely. So, and as usual, I will be flexible within reason in the length of time people can speak due to circumstances. So, now on to the business of the meeting. First one, apologies for absence.
Apologies from Councillor Pragnell. Provost.
Thank you very much. Okay. Oh, sorry, Tony.
Apologies from Councillor Ireland.
All right. Thank you.
Apologies from Councillor.
Okay, so I don't know if your microphone was on there, so I'll just say that it was Councillor McLean. Apologies for him. Thank you very much. And now on to declarations of interest. The Councillors' Code of Conduct requires elected members to declare any connection they may have in any of the items on the agenda. Does any member have any declarations of interest they wish to raise in respect of any items on our agenda today?
No.
There are none indicated. So I will now move to the item 3. That is the minute of the meeting of the 26th of April 2023, and the minute is submitted for approval. Agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed, thank you. Item 4, minute of the special meeting of 26th April 2023, again submitted for approval. Agreed? Agreed, thank you. Item 5, the minutes of meetings 27th April to 27th of June. So I will read out the list in the minute volume. You see before you the page number and the date, and so I would ask members to come in at the appropriate time, but if there's no comment, I would take that as approval. So I'm just going to go to the list now. So we've already done the council meeting, special council meeting. I will now go to the Cabinet of the 27th April. Appeals Committee, 3rd of May. Cabinet, 11th May. Audit and Scrutiny, 11th May. Licensing Committee, 16th May. Appointments Committee, 17th May. Cabinet, 1st of June. Appeals Committee, 5th of June. Planning Applications Committee, 7th of June, and Local Review Body, 7th of June. Education Committee, 8th of June. Appeals Committee, 9th of June. Licensing Committee, 13th of June. Cabinet, Police and Fire, 15th of June. Special Cabinet of the 19th of June. And lastly, Audit and Scrutiny of 22nd of June. There was no comment, so I take it that's agreed. Agreed? Thank you very much. So, back to the agenda now. Item 6. Thank you very much. Right, item 6. Statements by conveners, representatives on joint boards or committees. So we have 2 statements, first of all, by Councillor O'Donnell and then Councillor Anderson. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Provost. So I'm doing an update on the IJB in the absence of Councillor Pragnell. So the Integration Joint Board meeting was only held this afternoon, so this is hot off the press, and as a brief overview of our main points of discussion. We were very pleased to hear the results of the recently published joint inspection of adult support and protection services in East Renfrewshire that has described them as strong and effective. The joint inspection of the East Renfrewshire Health and Social Care Partnership took place between January and June 2023 and looked at the records of adults at risk of harm for a 2-year period, January 21 to January 23, a time, as you know, when authorities faced the unprecedented and ongoing challenge of service recovery as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. Inspectors said key processes for adult support and protection were very effective and demonstrated major strengths, which had led to positive outcomes for people in need of help. They also said strategic leadership for adult support and protection was effective, but concluded there were clear strengths supporting positive experiences and outcomes for adults at risk of harm, which collectively outweighed the areas of improvements. Inspectors said adults experienced improvements in their circumstances because of timely, person-centred and efficient adult support and protection interventions. They praised the overall quality and effectiveness of core adult support and protection processes. Members of the IJB asked that thanks were passed on to all involved for such an excellent outcome, which I hope all members here will agree, and look forward to reviewing the full report, which was only published yesterday. So congratulations to everyone at the HSCP. After much discussion, we also approved the Child Poverty Action Plan, which is on our agenda later this evening, and we discussed a more targeted approach that is being planned for the future years, but I'm sure we'll have an opportunity to talk about that later on in the agenda. The IJB unaudited annual report and accounts for 22-23 were approved for submission to our external auditors. The IJB also agreed its latest medium-term financial plan, covering the 5 years to 27-28, and recognised the scale of the challenge in the current year and ahead, and in particular the demographic challenges we face when delivering services. The IJB also welcomed the COVID reserve funding agreed by the Council earlier this financial year. The IJB recognised the remarkable effect and level of service that has been delivered and commended the amount of work that has been undertaken over the last year. We also had an update on the IJB Savings, Recovery and Renewal Programme, recognising progress made against the 7 million savings required in the current year, a really significant challenge. Around half of this target will come from the Supporting People framework, where we had discussion on the latest position and action plan for the coming months. The IJB also recognised the risk and uncertainty around the National Care Home contract at this time. The IJB had a presentation on delayed discharge, which I'm sure all members are acutely interested in, particularly with the data we saw over the Christmas period. And that showed that East Renfrewshire continues to perform very well and actually are consistently in the top 10 performers nationally and between 1 and 3 in the Glasgow City region, depending on the measure. Current figures are the lowest they have been for several years, so I think that gives members a lot of comfort, and we congratulated the team. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Jono. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you, Provost. Just have a quick statement with regards to the culture and leisure performance and also other schools information. So last month we had a board meeting at Glen Halls in Neilson. Prior to the meeting, myself and fellow board members were given a tour of the leisure facilities in the village. That included the leisure centre and library. At the meeting itself, we then heard the excellent news that the Trust has yet again made a surplus for the year 2022-23, thanks to the strong performance of the various operations. In particular, the gym, swimming, community sports and theatre facilities. Gym membership sits at an all-time high, The theatre broke all of its box office records last year, and our swimming lesson programme, despite the closure of Eastwood High School pool for refurbishment, was on target. It's a remarkable achievement and by no means the experience of many other leisure trusts and throughout the country. I want to repeat the sentiments expressed at the board meeting, congratulating the trust. Moving on, the Eastwood High School Sports Centre pool reopening. On the 7th of May, again, I attended the handover of the centre swimming pool following its refurbishment, that and of the facilities, changing facilities and the pool hall. And it's created excellent new changing cubicles, family changing spaces and extra showers. A fully compliant change space is also there for users with disabilities. The pool hall was upgraded and staff welfare and changing facilities have also improved, and the feedback from customers has already been extremely complimentary. Moving on to East Renfrewshire, the inter-secondary school sports. Again, I had the pleasure of attending this, the inter-school sports competition on the 23rd of May. All the 7 secondary schools submitted teams from S1, S3, and the boys and girls competing for an annual trophy. Williamwood High School hosted the games, and they had specifically the basketball, table tennis, hockey and girls football, and the rugby and boccia, I think it's pronounced, was staged at White Craigs Rugby Club, tennis at Clarkson Tennis Club. There was obviously a very keen competition, and points were awarded for each school, so that each place in each sport counts to the total tally. Williamwood High School perhaps enjoyed home advantage to come out this year's winners, but every school competed well in every sport. It was very excellent fun and exciting for being in a multi-sport event, and for the children, I think, particularly enjoyed visiting other schools as a highlight of the calendar. So, moving on now to East Renfrewshire, there was a follow-up, school leaver destinations. The Council will remember we had a statement in March in which we highlighted the very strong initial school leaver destination results. Delighted now to report that in the recent Scottish Government publication looking at leavers 6 months later, 97.5% of the 21-22 school leavers were still in a positive destination. This is our best ever performance, and well above the national average of 93.5%. In almost all of our schools, all school leavers achieved a positive destination, but it's very appropriate to highlight that Barryhead High School still had 100% of leavers in a positive destination. I'm sure the Council will join me in passing on a congratulations and thanks to all the staff and partners in our 7 secondary schools for these outstanding results. Thank you.
I'm sure that everyone will agree with that, Councillor Anderson.
Yeah.
So I'm now going to hand over to Councillor O'Donnell to say a few words about Lorraine's retirement. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks very much, Provost. I'm very keen to take this opportunity at this, her last full Council meeting, to thank Lorraine for her wonderful contribution to the work of East Renfrewshire Council during her 15 years as Chief Executive. I'm sure members will be grateful that I'm not making a political statement today. Instead, I'm making a public statement of recognition and thanks to our retiring Chief Executive. In her time as CEO, Lorraine's efforts have undoubtedly helped this Council cement its position as one of the best-run councils in Scotland, and more importantly than that, has improved the lives of people across East Renfrewshire. That is why all members stand for election, to help improve people's lives, and Lorraine has certainly helped deliver on our shared goals and ambitions. Lorraine, the list of council achievements during your time with us is a long one, but I do want to mention just a few of the main highlights. These are some of your best bits, as they would say in Big Brother. Education is, of course, a service East Renfrewshire is renowned for, and your time as Chief Executive has seen a transformation of our school estate to match the ambition of our talented and engaged young people. The Council has built so many new high schools, new primary schools, new nurseries and new family centres. You could be forgiven for losing track of the number of official opening ceremonies you have attended over the years. I know education has been a key personal interest of yours, but I am also aware that it's not just been about attainment and impressive new buildings, and that one of your proudest achievements has been the creation of the Council's Champions Board. This is an important forum where our care experienced young people engage directly with our CMT and elected members to improve the life experiences of those in care. I know how much this work has meant to Lorraine over the years. At our last session just a few weeks ago, there was an impressive presentation by the young people themselves about what has been achieved up until now and the challenges which lie ahead. And they specifically called out Lorraine's impact on that whole process. Our focus on young people and education will continue later this year with the opening of our new learning campus in Neilson, which includes new homes for 2 primary schools and a family centre. This is one of the biggest projects the Council has delivered in recent years, and a great example of the ambition and forward planning which has been a mainstay of Lorraine's tenure here. Going beyond education, there was also the hundreds of new council homes we have built in Barrhead and Newton Mearns, the dozens of local residential roads which have been resurfaced, and the delivery of City Deal projects such as the Greenlaw Works Business Centre, and many of those projects still to come. These exciting projects in the pipeline are testament to Lorraine's time as Chief Executive. East Renfrewshire Council has never rested on its laurels. We've not allowed it to. We've always looked to improve, to innovate, and to improve the lives of local people. Lorraine has championed that mantra at a national level and made a significant contribution to local government in Scotland, sitting on the board of the Improvement Service and providing strategic leadership to the local government digital office. She provided strong leadership during what I'm sure was the most difficult time of her professional life, as the huge challenges presented by COVID took hold. Offices and schools were closed as councils were thrust into the front line of providing an emergency response to help our most vulnerable residents. Staff worked round the clock, often whilst having to cope with their own loved ones falling ill. The pride felt by everyone in local government of what they were able to contribute was shared by Lorraine, who marshalled our response and who also importantly took time out to praise all those at East Renfrewshire Council who helped. Those who held elected office at the time have told me how Lorraine's own personal professionalism came to the fore and how all elected members were very much appreciated her efforts. I wasn't at all surprised to learn this, as since I became council leader last year, that professionalism is what has struck me the most about Lorraine. I very quickly came to have complete trust in Lorraine and recognised that here was a chief executive of the highest integrity. Although we've had our moments, on a personal level, I greatly value the support she has given me, not only as leader, but as a newly elected councillor. I thank you, Lorraine. Now, the great challenge for all councils is funding, and again, Lorraine's knowledge and wisdom has been vital in helping steering us through these increasingly choppy waters. Crucially, that doesn't mean shying away from difficult decision, but nor does it mean curbing the big plans that we have for the future of East Renfrewshire. These talents of Lorraine's, which I've been describing, chime perfectly with the values of our council, values which were developed and embedded within the organisation under her stewardship. Our values are ambition, kindness and trust. Lorraine has embodied those values day in and day out and has helped contribute greatly to improving the lives of everyone in East Renfrewshire over the last 15 years. Being the chief executive of a local authority is never easy. You can't please everyone all of the time. You have to make difficult and sometimes unpopular decisions. You have to show grit, determination and resilience. You have to show tremendous leadership and carry all of that, and if that's not enough, but with some grace, patience and good humour. To have given that length of time to public service at such a senior level is a fantastic achievement, and one that you and your family should be immensely proud of and look back on with great fondness. I will now, Lorraine, I thank you for your contribution. You will be greatly missed, and I am sure everyone here will join me in wishing you a very long and very happy retirement, and I'm sure it's going to be very busy. I will now ask the Provost to invite Lorraine to say some words in response. All members will have an opportunity to speak at the end of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. But before you do, Lorraine, I would also like to pay my own tribute at this point for the incredible service that you have given during your 15 years as our Chief Executive. As a councillor for many years, I've seen at first hand how Lorraine has handled so well the many challenges that a long career in local government presents. The common denominator in how she has tackled these so expertly has been her humility and the kindness and support she has shown to colleagues and elected members alike. With Lorraine, it's never been about her, and has always been about teamwork and what is the best for the people of East Renfrewshire. When Lorraine first joined the council back in 2008, she became only the 5th woman to be appointed a chief executive in one of Scotland's councils. I'm glad to say that since then, there has been a huge increase in the number of women in the top jobs at Scotland's councils. The figure indeed rose to half of the 32 council chief executives a couple of years ago, and although it has dropped slightly since then, I hope it won't be too long before that is again remedied. Trailblazers such as Lorraine have been important role models for all those women who have followed her into senior positions, and on International Women's Day earlier this year, I was proud to stand alongside her and all the female members of our corporate management team. Lorraine, we thank you for all that you have done for the people of East Renfrewshire and wish you a very long and very happy retirement. And hand to you now to say a few words, or as many words as you like.
Thank you very much, Leader, and thank you very much, Provost, for your kind words. And it will certainly be a few words I say. I think very few people realise the scope of what we do in councils. I think many people, if you ask what a council does, starts with roads and bins, and it is important as they are. In East Renfrewshire, a lot of our residents will then very, very quickly say schools, because that's the one of the most important things that we do, and a reason people move to the area because of the strengths of our schools. But I think few people realise the caring part of what we do in councils, and that so many of our services are focused on helping and supporting people when they're at their most vulnerable, and that's the work that goes on in the background. It's the work with our care experienced young people, which I am so pleased to see. I've seen our care experienced young people grow and develop, and it has been just so exciting to see that. The work we do in homelessness, the work we do with refugees, the work we do with our very youngest people in our family centres and nurseries, and always get great joy going there. Something that always brings you to a real focus in life when you see young children playing. Our older people who need care and support, be it through telecare in Bonnyton and through our care homes, our care home in Bonnyton, the work we do in money advice, and most times people will not mention these when they talk about councils, but these and many, many other services are all about caring for people and being there when people are at their most vulnerable in life and supporting them. We also do a lot of emergency planning. I've always said that chief executives spend a lot of their life training for emergencies, and they hope that they manage to retire before that emergency happens. I didn't, but I am very glad of all the training I went through in preparation for it. And I think for many of us, the pandemic has influenced our lives so immensely, and it's certainly impacted my thoughts, my way of working, and my priorities in life, and I'll never forget that experience, but I was glad to be here to do what I could at that time. But more importantly, I want to thank my colleagues all over the Council for everything they've done every day, day in and day out, especially through the pandemic when staff were working all the hours through that. The leader mentioned our values of ambition, kindness and trust. Our team, our Council team, live those values every day in a far better way than I ever do. I am very humble when I see the many ways our teams and our individuals every single day working with our residents live those values, be it our teachers, everybody in the Council really tries to live those values, and they're tough values to live, and they do their best to live them. So I want to thank them. And I want to thank councillors for putting your trust in me 15 years ago. Given that I come in here as Chief Executive, never having worked in a council before, it was a brave decision of that panel of councillors. I'm very glad you made that decision. I've thoroughly enjoyed my 15 years. There's been many tough times, many stressful times, but also many joyful times. And I think from now on, what I will remember is the joyful times. So thank you very much for putting that trust in me. And I will go into my retirement with many great memories. Thank you very much.
Very good.
Thank you, Lorraine. And now on to agenda item number 7, provost engagements. That's for noting. Agreed? Item number 8.
Agreed.
Sorry?
Agreed.
Agreed. Oh, thank you very much, Councillor Cunningham. On to item 8, General Fund Capital Programme. So the recommendations to note and approve the movement. So there's 2 recommendations there. Are there any questions or comments, or can we agree the paper? Agreed. Thank you. On to item number 9, Housing Capital Programme. Again, if we can agree the recommendations in the report. Are there any questions or comments? Any questions or comments?
Agreed.
Can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. So item 10, Strategic End-Year Performance Report and Annual Community Planning and Fairer East Renfrewshire Report for 2022-23. So I'm going to invite Councillor O'Donnell to come in at this point to give an introduction to the 3 following items, which is 10, 11 and 12. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thank you, Provost. These 3 reports are very much linked together. Items 10 and 11 are backward-facing reports, which you would have seen before, and tell the story of the Council and our partners' performance over the last year, while also fulfilling our statutory reporting obligation. The Council's performance reporting, although shaped in a cluttered and complex national reporting landscape, is organised around our 5 outcomes of the East Renfrewshire Community Plan, alongside the Council's own performance focus on its customers, efficiency and people. Item 11, Local Child Poverty Action Report, is presented separately to meet legislative and integrated joint board reporting requirements. As I mentioned earlier, it was discussed at the IJB, and I'm sure there will be comments on that report coming out of it. Item 12 actually looks forward, and this is our vision for the future. This is a framework and a timetable for developing the vision for the future. The vision for the future for the Council always has to be updated on a fairly regular basis. Nothing stands still, and our vision for the future can't stand still either. So this is very much setting out our process of getting to that vision for the future and agreeing what our strategic outcomes should be. There's a timetable within it for us to agree. We've had a lot of agreement or discussion with members and stakeholders, and that can be discussed at a later point in terms of the process. Once we agree the strategic outcomes at a later point, that will then feed back into our strategic end-year performance reports and how we report against progress against that vision for the future. Specifically on item 10, and I can come back on item 11 when we're at item 11, I'd just like to flag a few things. Annex 1 focuses on the Council's performance over the last year, providing data updates where available, trends and notes on progress against the outcome delivery plan for 22-23 targets. I will flag at this stage there are some errors in staff absences, which I know has been an area of heated debate in this Council before. There are errors in that, and Louise will come back with revised figures on those at a later point. Key strengths in the Council performance. No surprise, educational attainment and leaver destinations has always been very strong for us. As alluded to by Councillor Anderson, an increase in leisure centre use, sector-leading recycling rates and environment, and 94 new high-quality affordable council homes, improvements towards the Council closing the gender pay gap, and the establishment of the new Employee Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Network. Areas that do require a continued focus include children's advocacy, the poverty-related attainment gap, which we'll probably pick up again, while the growing complexity and demand of care packages remains a key strategic challenge for this Council. Annex 2 talks about our partners' performance and takes a backward look at the community planning partnership's performance in 22-23 against the 5 strategic outcomes. And some of these, again, we're seeing improving trends in birth weight and breastfeeding. East Renfrewshire remains a very low crime area, and while resident satisfaction with East Renfrewshire as a council remains above the national average, satisfaction rates have been falling over the past number of years, in line with what we're seeing in councils across Scotland. Other areas of concern for us are fewer residents reporting they are participating in physical activity, and the well-being of carers and their quality of life. And then Annex 3 goes into a number of case studies to bring this to life. There's one thing about data and numbers and percentages, but it's helpful to bring some of these results into life. So with that, I would recommend that we review and scrutinise some of the Council's strategic performance, 22-23, Annex 1, review and scrutinise the community plan and Fair East Rent annual progress at Annex 2, and consider the case studies and review and scrutinise complaints, which I haven't mentioned actually, which I should have. We have seen a reduction in complaints year on year, which is pleasing to see. So perhaps if we take any questions on those, on item 10 first of all.
Okay, are there any questions or comments? Councillor Wallace.
I've got 2 areas I'd like to cover, if I could. If I could just deal with it one at a time. The first one is to do with the complaints. I'm surprised this year we don't actually have any comparators on. I'm looking at page 133. Last year when this was reported, we actually had comparators with previous years. I'm surprised we don't have it this year, because we have actually seen a reduction from 16 down to 10.6, which is a significant improvement, albeit from what I can understand, last year or the previous year was to do with the garden waste scheme being introduced, which caused quite a bit of consternation, a lot of complaints that came through. However, I did ask last year as to whether we had comparator information on to be able to compare with other councils. And last year I was informed that only 17 councils actually reported on this. We've got what's called the National Complaint Handlers Network, and I think one of our officers at the time reported that only 17 councils were actually putting the data into this. But there was the thought that at the end of September of last year that this would be rectified and that all councils would be reporting all the data. Could I ask, first of all, has this been rectified? Do we now have all 32 councils actually providing data to the National Complaint Handlers Network to allow us to do comparators? Thank you.
Thank you. Who's going to answer this? Lorraine?
It will be Louise.
Thanks, Councillor Wallace. I'm happy to take that back to my team and find out the information for you. I don't have that information with me tonight, but we'll come back to you about that. Thank you.
Councillor Wallace?
Thank you. Look forward to that. The second issue I'd like to raise is about male life.
Sorry, Councillor Wallace, can I interrupt you? Thank you for giving the page number for the last one.
Yes.
But could you start with the page number so that we can all get there?
Page 111.
111. Thank you very much.
Everybody time to get there. Male life expectancy. Now, there is a clear closing of the gap in male life expectancy between East Renfrewshire and the Scottish average, which would be excellent news, but for the fact that the closing of the gap would appear to be as a result of a significant reduction in the life expectancy of males in East Renfrewshire. Could we perhaps have some comment as to why that should be? Thank you.
Again, who would answer this question? Is it Julie?
It will be Julie, but I don't think she's got the answer.
All right.
No, I'll need to go back and have a look at that. I don't have the detail of that with me, Councillor Wallace. I'll go and have a look and see if there's anything we can find.
Okay, Lorraine, you can add to that. Thank you.
I can't answer that specific problem, but that specific issue. But there is some, with the impact of COVID and some other issues, there has been some changes to life expectancy across the UK. You know, we had an upward trend and we've moved away from that. We sometimes have quite small data sets, so it could be part of that. But there is a wider changes in both life expectancy and sadly in death rates as well. The death rates are still slightly higher. So there's a number of different factors that we've flagged up, and over the next year I know Julie's team will be looking at. I think we need to get a bit more information, but it is something we are watching. It's not something that the council can directly influence, but it does give this a good indicator of the strength of the local area and how health is in Scotland and how it's comparing in East Renfrewshire. So I think it's a good point to raise, and one that we'll be gathering more information as we can.
Thank you. Councillor Wallace, do you want to ask a further question?
Just finally, rather than it appears as if this is all critique from this end, it's certainly not. Just very good to see on page 113 about park footfall, which interestingly, if you look back to 2019-2020, around about 1 million lots of footfall, if you like, into our parks, and then, not surprisingly, we saw during COVID that went up to 1.6 million, which I'm absolutely delighted to see that has been retained, and we've actually so significant improvement there, and congratulations to our Environment Department for creating a tremendous environment for people to visit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor Wallace. Councillor MacDonald is indicated online, and then I'll come to you, Councillor Edlin. Councillor MacDonald.
Thanks, Provost. I just wanted to comment on the leader's statement there. I mean, we do live in an affluent area, in fact, a very affluent area if you look at the rest of Scotland. But one of the downsides of that is that those that don't, that live within deprived areas within our overall affluent area, and also those that live within deprived households that don't necessarily live in deprived areas, many of the young people that live within these households are being left behind. And, you know, we've got support there for school uniform allowance, things like this, free school meals for those that qualify. But one thing is that, and I'll give you an example, there was a recent school trip organised through Busby Primary School to Lochgoyle Head for 4 days, and the cost of which for each child was significant. We're talking multiple hundreds of pounds to send each child to Lochgoyle Head. There were quite a few children that were left behind because simply their families couldn't afford it.
Sorry, Councillor MacDonald, could you tell us what part of the report that you're commenting on?
It was about the statement that council leader discussed about the affluence of our area, and I think it's important to highlight that given the fact that we do live in an affluent area, there are people that are being left behind, and I would like to see more support from the council for children, particularly from less affluent families, and to be able to access the same kind of things that are on offer through schools, officially through schools. So, for instance, school trips. I would like to see more support coming in that regard to equal the disparity a little bit.
Do you want to answer that? Mark, would you like to comment on what's been said? Thank you.
Thank you, Provost. It's obviously difficult to comment on the specific case there without knowing any of the details. Perhaps what I would say is a couple of things, and it might well stray into the next paper, but the schools have done a lot around the cost of the school day. There is an audit tool that they've used. There's a significant number of kind of different measures that they've put in place to try and address that. It is built into, council members will be aware of pupil equity funding, so schools all receive an additional £1,200 for each pupil that's registered for free school meals. So in the case of the particular example that Councillor MacDonald suggested, school trips, schools are able to use that flexibly to support youngsters in terms of those sort of enrichment activities. There are also, I know, many of our schools where they will very discreetly, behind the scenes, link in with parent councils to make sure that youngsters who perhaps would have financial barriers to going on school trips are able to attend those. So there would be a range of things I think our schools are doing, albeit Councillor MacDonald raises an important point that making sure that all those activities are available to our young people is key.
Thank you. Councillor Edlin.
Thank you, Provost. My first question relates to page 73 of the documents. I would like to know, it relates to the percentage of those whose care need has reduced following reablement and rehabilitation, which the performance has gone down from 60% to 48%. It seems a significant fall in performance, but I would like to ask what the actual numbers are, because if it's a large number of real people, then obviously it's more significant than if it's only one or two. So my question is, how many are there, and can I ask why this fall in performance has occurred? Was it emergence from COVID that caused that, or something similar, or what? It just seems surprising to read that. And my other question relates to page 76.
Sorry, could we take it one at a time, please?
Oh, sorry, I'll stop then.
Yeah, so that's fine. Sorry. We can get that first one answered.
Thank you. I don't have the actual number to hand, Councillor Edlin, but I do know that the part of the reason is just the significant pressure on the service and the volume of referrals, and it's really been reacting in full on. And the other factor is the people that we are supporting are frailer and less able to be re-abled, as it were. And there's many more people coming out of hospital requiring two carers to support them. So there's a number of factors, but all pandemic related and service pressure related. So we hope to get back to sort of normal business in the course of the next year in terms of increasing our numbers around reablement. But I will have to check the actual number.
Okay, and you will come back with that for Councillor Edlin. Okay, so if you're happy to leave that point and move on to your next one, Councillor Edlin.
Yes, I'm happy with that
explanation. And what page was it you said?
Page 76. Sickness, absent days per employee. I'd like to, there is an increase in the sickness absent days for 9, which you can see in the graph. I would like to ask I would like to know what the numbers are, if the numbers are a small number, or exactly how many we're talking about here, employees, that is, rather than just a percentage. And that was my question. I think we've discussed the reasons for absences in a previous meeting, so I don't need to ask that question, but I would like to know the actual numbers, please.
Louise?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Councillor Edlin, for your question. As the Leader alluded to in his introduction, there are issues with the absence data that is in this report today. So I would draw members' attention to page 76, as you've said, the graph there, and also the paragraph 61 on page 51, which also relates to absence. We became aware of an error in the way that the absence data has been calculated for today's paper. So I would ask you to disregard the absence data that's in this paper and note that when we resolve that issue, we will come back with a further update and we can do raw numbers at that point for you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else on that, Councillor Edlin? You're happy enough with that?
That concludes my questions. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much, Provost. Following on from my colleague's question, I'd like to ask, do we expect the data to show an improvement on what's there, or do we actually not know at all once the data is corrected?
Thanks, Councillor Morrison. It is our hope, and our unverified data suggests it will show an improvement, but I would like to go away and verify that data more appropriately before I give you a firm commitment to that today. So I'll come back. Thank you.
Appreciate that, thank you. I do have another question, Provost, if that's okay, which is on page 134. It relates to our performance in terms of complaints. So, as my colleague Councillor Wallace stated, that there's nothing to really benchmark this against other than that small data set against the Scottish Public Service Ombudsman performance levels. And I see that in 2 of those 4 measurements we're actually short of target. Are there any particular identified reasons for us being short of target? Has anyone investigated that at all? Thank you.
And this is Louise again. Louise?
We will look in future years to try and give you some comparative data with this report, so we will take that away as an action from today. Thank you. Due to some system changes that we've made around our complaint system this year, the detailed service level analysis behind all of this is still ongoing, and that work with services is ongoing and will be available during our mid-year update, which should come to Council in December. So we'll hope to have some more analysis at that point for you. Thank you.
Okay. Oh, Councillor Morrison.
It is the last one, I promise. Also, like Councillor Wallace, to finish on a positive. It's really encouraged to see in page 63, the first comparison there, that we're 110% over target in terms of indoor sports and leisure facilities visitor numbers, which is showing a really, really strong recovery post-COVID. So congratulations to everyone concerned. And I suppose in terms of the question I've asked in this chamber previously regarding the potential premature closure of Neilston Leisure Centre, and I hope that these figures will be taken into account, that actually we could revisit that, particularly when a representative on the Culture and Leisure Trust reported the Trust being in a surplus earlier at this meeting, so it would be quite good to get that assurance that a potential early closure of Neilston Leisure Centre is now off the table. Thank you.
Yes, please.
I think you need to be very careful with the wording there, because there is no plans that I'm aware of premature closing of Neilston Leisure Centre. As and when the plans for the new leisure centre comes on board, there may be optionality as to where it is, and depending where it is, and if it's a refurbishment or a new build, there potentially might have to be temporary closure while that's being refurbished. But we really are not in a position at all of saying that's the case, and it would be misleading to say in public that there is plans to close Neilston Leisure Centre. That is certainly not planned currently. Thank you.
That's very encouraging. Thank you.
If there are no more comments or questions, can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. And moving on to item 11. And Councillor O'Donnell. Thank you.
So item 11, Local Child Poverty Action Report, which was discussed earlier at IJB. The good news is that East Renfrewshire has amongst the lowest child poverty rates in mainland Scotland, if not the lowest. However, this isn't about percentages, it's about individual child experiences. And it is a cause of concern and remains a key focus for the Council, HSCP and community planning partners. And it's estimated that there's been an increase in the proportion of children living in poverty in East Renfrewshire from 12.8% to 14.4%, around 200 or so children. And that, when you think of that 200 children and you visualise, you look at schools and think, this is real people that's being impacted by this. While year-on-year data needs to be treated with caution, it's somewhat hopeful that East Renfrewshire's estimated increase is lower than the Scotland level increase, and so far it appears to be well below the increase of 1,000 additional local children falling into poverty, which was discussed when we started the cost of living programme around about this time last year. So I'm sure there will be debates on this paper, and I welcome questions on that. So perhaps if we open up to questions before we go to recommendations.
Are there any questions? Councillor Bamforth.
Thank you, Chair. I brought this up at the IGB earlier, but I'm going to bring it up again, particularly as Mr Ratter is here and has already mentioned the cost of the school day. On page 164, it mentions the cost of the school day in the Dressing for Excellence policy, and it specifically says this includes a strong focus on reducing the cost of uniform and working in partnership with parents to develop sustainable and cost-effective approaches to uniform. It's great so many of our schools have school banks where they exchange second-hand uniforms, and however I know from the Back to School Bank, a charity, that the number of referrals has hugely increased. But what really concerns me is, and I brought it up today as I say at the IGB, that I know one school in one of our less affluent areas has brought in a new policy around girls' skirts, and I believe I found out since then that a second school on this side of the authority also has, whereby they're changing the uniform policy where girls, which looks nice. I'm not, the tartan skirts, they all look very smart. All of our children look very smart. However, you can't go into a supermarket and buy a specific tartan skirt, which I believe cost around £22 a skirt. You can't buy that in, I was going to mention some supermarkets, but at the moment they're allowed to wear black skirts, black trousers, white shirts, etc. There is a period of grace, I believe, of a year. However, come next year, there are some parents who, like as I say, the school uniform exchanges, will exchange uniforms and also have maybe siblings that they can hand uniforms to. This is the worst time ever to be changing a uniform and setting these expectations up to change uniforms. Is there something education can do? I know this is from the HSCP, the Child Poverty Report, but I know you work collaboratively. Can something be done? And I don't know what you can be done. I guess you can't reverse that decision. I don't know if it's individual head teachers are deciding this, but for two of our schools who are saying come August the school uniform policy has changed, I don't think is appropriate in these times.
Thank you. Mark, would you like to respond to that? Thank you.
Thank you, Provost, and thank you to Councillor Bamforth. I think we're talking about St Luke's High School. I think we should just be... there's been a number of questions, perhaps from residents and so on. So, as you mentioned, the Education Department updated its Dressing for Excellence, and it was taken to Education Committee and approved last June. And St Luke's have then undertaken a consultation with their parents and with their pupils in line with that, and looked at a variety of different options. And the parents and the pupils agreed, a majority of them agreed on the change to the school skirt that you referenced. But as you can imagine, St Luke's, if you know the senior management team there, they're absolutely committed to supporting their school community in terms of the cost of the school day. Mm-hmm. And that has been a key consideration in terms of how they've implemented that. So you mentioned one kind of way that they've done that, where they've had a transition year, so that if parents already had uniform, they were making sure that they continued to be able to wear it. They had a school bank last summer, again, to allow parents just to be able to come in and swap uniform, and that was very successful. They have also supported families in terms of any financial purchases, and there's been a number of families that have taken up that offer and received a skirt by the school. So the school is actually doing things specifically. But I think probably the key thing is that they shared links with the families via their sort of online shopping links, where the school skirt can be bought for £13. So it's essentially the same price as you can buy the black skirt. So I think that's the absolutely key bit in this, that the policy itself challenges schools to make sure that the cost of the school uniform can be bought in terms of the sort of school clothing grants. So that is our expectation, and I would anticipate that the school on the east of the authority would also need to make sure that it can be purchased for a reasonable price and similar to the black skirt. So hopefully that gives you some reassurance, Councillor Bamforth.
Any other points, Councillor Bamforth?
That's just the same point. Eastwood, I spoke to Eastwood today, and apparently the school skirt is £22 at Eastwood. I get what you're saying. I just think this is, and I get that there's been a consultation. I would be interested in how many parents actually responded to that consultation. Given most consultations, the response rate isn't very high. I just wanted the point noted that whilst we're trying to cut down, and the Scottish Government has a policy on the cost of the school day, it just seems an inappropriate time So I just thought I would mention it since it's mentioned in the report and you mentioned it in the previous item.
Thank you. If there are no other points, comments or questions, can we agree the report and the recommendations within there? Okay, thank you very much. Sorry. Oh yes, thanks very much. So moving on now to item 12, Vision for the Future. Councillor O'Donnell.
Thanks again, Provost. I think I probably said everything I needed to say about this paper in my introduction. The Cross-Party Budget Strategy Group has met twice this year to discuss Vision for the Future and our shared long-term ambitions for East Renfrewshire. It's very important that this is owned by all of us, and it should not be party political. It should be owned by all of us, and all members have been encouraged to engage in the process. The paper before members sets out the journey to date, emerging themes that have come through from consultation, not just with members, but also with the community, which will be ongoing. The report also sets out a roadmap for the next year, or so, and actually it goes beyond the next year, and how we translate our 3 high-level themes into a strategic planning framework that will help us track and deliver our progress, just as we've done in item 10 and item 11, towards making our shared ambitions reality. So with that, it's really a question of opening up to questions now before going to the recommendation.
Okay, thank you. Any questions or comments from colleagues? There's none indicated. Okay, can we agree the recommendations within the report? Agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. On now to item 13. And is it Councillor O'Donnell again? Who's going to introduce this?
Thanks, Provost. Again, I think most members should be aware that this was coming because we had separate member briefings on the process around Local Development Plan 3. This is very much about setting out the framework and the regulatory framework and consulting framework which we need to apply in order to really kick off the detailed planning process. I don't really think I need to add anything more in terms of introduction. I think the paper is highly technical, but it is a process document. It's not saying what LDP3 will be. It's just about how we get to LDP3. So I'll leave it to questions.
Okay, are there any questions or comments on that agenda item? Okay, can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. On to item 14, that's the second review of Scottish parliamentary boundaries. And Lorraine, are you going to speak to this one at all?
I will do.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Provost. The second review of Scottish parliamentary boundaries consultation has been completed, but the Council were allowed to put in a late consultation. We got permission to do that. In the meantime, as returning officer, I put a submission in explaining that in my view as returning officers, the proposals were not, could be better. And that I didn't believe that the Eastwood area, the splitting of the Eastwood constituency and the changes to Renfrewshire South really reflected the aims of the aims of the Boundary Commission, where they're supposed to give cognizance to local authority boundaries, to local ties, and a number of other areas. So I consulted with the 3 political group leaders and gave offers to others, independents, if they wanted to have a chat about it. I put the response in, and now what you have in front of you today is a potential response from the Council, but making the same points as I had made in my response as returning officer. I've taken out a couple of the points that were particularly about the administration of of elections, because I thought that was more important for me to mention rather than councillors, and that won't be quite as important to you as it is to me about these of administration. But I hope that the main points I've made and the options are you would find of interest. I think the what is important, the Boundary Commission have given us a month essentially to respond, but in that if we objected we were asked to come up with other options. That was really difficult given the amount of data analysis you would need to do in that time. So what we have done in the paper is put some broad options in the paper about, with the main recommendation being that the Eastwood constituency should stay as a constituency with a couple of options for its boundaries, and that Renfrewshire South with some changes should stay rather than the changes proposed by the Boundary Commission. But I'm happy to take any questions on it or as part of the discussion. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Lorraine. Are there any comments or questions? Councillor Wallace, first of all.
More really comments. When we actually look at the vision of the future and a SWOT analysis that was carried out, and part of that was, as far as the threats were concerned, was the so-called potential for the kind of political changes in the kind of boundary makeup. What I have to say here is, and I believe at one or two community councils, discussion on the boundaries and the proposed changes in boundaries have been kind of closed down in the suggestion that it's all to do with politics. My suggestion here is this has got absolutely nothing to do with politics and everything to do, because really what the impact here, as far as we ourselves here as a group can see, is that this is really a precursor to the removal of East Renfrewshire Council as a standalone authority. And it should come as no surprise that this should come also at a time at which suggestions that we're going to see increases in council tax of 22% or so, etc., which will affect many, many households in East Renfrewshire. The principal concern I have here, and I appreciate we cannot comment on this in our response because it's a bit of a crystal ball here, but the concern here is that on Eastwood's side we have a relatively very affluent side of the authority, and on the other side in Leven Valley, perhaps more challenged area. And even in Eastwood itself we have our pockets of deprivation. But the great thing about us in East Renfrewshire is that we've taken all the strengths of that relative prosperity and managed to invest in areas in which there has been difficulty. Barrhead being a prime example. I mean, if you actually look at the improvements that we've seen as an authority in Barrhead, has been quite extraordinary, and it's something that I think we should all be very grateful and proud of. The difficulty we have here, as I see it, is if we lose East Renfrewshire, many of these areas that have seen this great investment will go way down the ladder in terms of priorities. If we see, for example, my own ward, Giffington Thornley Bank, for example, neighbouring ward, Williamwood, Stamplin, etc., would be hived off into Glasgow. And can you imagine what that would be? I mean, Glasgow will be rubbing their hands with glee here, but if you can think, our communities here in East Renfrewshire and on this side of the authority are not going to see any of that benefit. That's going to disappear way around Glasgow. I'm not suggesting that's a bad thing as far as Glasgow is concerned, but as far as the residents of East Renfrewshire and our more challenged communities are concerned, it's a big, big minus. And it's exactly the same on the Renfrewshire side as well, in which we lose Newton Mearns, Eaglesham, prosperous areas, then moving into Renfrewshire and the very challenging areas that will have priority over these resources compared with our communities in East Renfrewshire. I appreciate that you cannot include this, as I already mentioned, in our response here. But what I would say, I'm disappointed at the lack of awareness of our residents in East Renfrewshire of this consultation. I do believe that the council was asked, or all councils were asked by the Boundaries Commission to try and publicise this. What we've done is our level of communication with our East Renfrewshire residents has been a couple of retweets of a very generic Boundary Commission tweet, and similarly with our kind of posting, one post that we've had on Facebook, and which really did not spell out what the dangers are to East Renfrewshire, its whole being. So that is really the comment I would like to make. But I do hope that the next stage that we do see a proper inquiry carried out, which is really what's very clearly laid out here is our request for a local inquiry, and hopefully that strength of feeling within East Renfrewshire and these threats that we're referring to will be raised by the local communities and our community councils, etc., who will all hopefully get a chance to have their say. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Lorraine, would you like to respond to these comments?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Wallace. And I've said in the paper we had a cross-party group, and there was a common feeling across that. Now, just as a reminder, though, this is only at the moment about the Scottish parliamentary constituencies. So, although people may be concerned it could lead further, the consultation is strictly on that. And I think behind it is more about getting electoral parity and getting constituencies of the same size, I think, is what's been behind it. We did, as a council, we were asked by the Boundary Commission to promote it, which we did. And I know a number of other people have promoted it, politicians and others have promoted, so I think it should have been seen quite widely. We could not, as a council, take a line on it until we'd had it. We've now had a council meeting. We'll come to a decision on it on the paper, hopefully in a few minutes. But we can't, as officers, put out a particular yea or nay against it until there's been a decision. So our social media could only appropriately point people to the consultation. But I certainly saw on social media quite a lot of tweets from politicians reminding people that they could. So I hope a lot of people have known about it. And you were talking about community councils, so hopefully they will respond appropriately as well. So thank you for that. And thanks for your contribution to the group as well.
Thank you. Councillor Buchanan, then Councillor Morrison.
Yeah, thanks, Provost. I think it's a bit unfortunate that it's got to this stage. As the Chief Executive outlined, this isn't about threats or scaremongering or anything else. It's simply following procedure. That procedure being that the Boundary Commission is required to review the said boundaries. We've recently had one for Westminster, which has been done, and this follows on from that to look at the particular boundaries based on what the current numbers are. And that's solely the reason for it. It's looking at the size of constituencies and taking that into account. They look at it in terms of looking at it on a map and saying, if we draw a line here, what's the population within this area? And they put that forward. I think, as was discussed in terms of our cross-party position, it was reasonable that we look at that and ask them to review that to make sure that they've got the numbers right, if you like, and if there are any alternatives. But it's not about scaremongering that East Renfrewshire will no longer exist. It's not about worrying about where it might go next. It's simply the process, the due process, that happens on numerous occasions, has happened in the past, and will no doubt continue to happen in the future in terms of constituency boundaries for the respective parliamentary seats. And it's unfortunate, I think, that a lot of comments appear to have been made about what happens in East Renfrewshire. And yes, we do look after all of our residents in East Renfrewshire. And sadly, I remember a time when I was as convener for economic development and growth, receiving lots of complaints about why we were spending all the money in the Leven Valley, and highlighting that, well, we spend money in East Renfrewshire to ensure that everyone has an equal chance in the terms of their life outcomes, and we want to ensure that that continues. This is simply a process that we have to comply with. The Boundary Commission have done their initial drawings, and we will see if anything further can be done in that request.
Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much, Provost. As one Ward 2 councillor follows another, I'm acutely aware of the fact there's only 3 elected representatives on East Renfrewshire Council who actually serve ward areas which cuts across more than one constituency boundary as things currently stand. And that's a very highly desirable position to be in, and that all of the other councillors serve areas which are wholly within one constituency boundary. And, you know, the three elected members, it's myself, Councillor Buchanan, Councillor O'Donnell, you know, it's the three main political parties all represented there, plus myself as Conservative. And I think that the three of us can be agreed, along with everyone else, that as we go from one part of our ward to the other, from the Eastwood part of the ward to the Leven Valley side of the ward in Neilston, there's quite a clear geographical boundary there in the forms of the dams to Darnley Country Park, and that our residents on both sides of the dams know very clearly which constituency they reside within and who their constituency MSP is, and I see no reason to change that. In fact, there's a very clear geographical boundary which is used in other aspects of the Council's planning, for example, looking at Local Development Plan 2 and the fact that we've got two distinct housing sub-market areas in Leven Valley and in Eastwood. And I think that these constituency boundaries, if they were changed, they would undermine the Council's ability to plan along the basis that it has been doing. So I really just wanted to say that I commend the representation, and I think it's very important to have that public inquiry. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor MacDonald online.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I think it's important that we draw the attention to what Councillor Buchanan previously said. This is purely about readdressing boundary lines to deal with population. I would imagine also that there's potentially a motivation as well is to create future constituencies that represent a larger kaleidoscope of economic demographic within them, and have members of the National Parliament more readily represent a far greater variance of society and economic background. I'm really disappointed, to be honest with you, because as Councillor Buchanan had mentioned, there has been a lot of scaremongering on social media by certain politicians out there who are using words like, quote unquote, Eastwood becoming part of Glasgow, unquote, just simply because the proposed name change would contain the word Glasgow. And I think it's disappointing to see, because clearly the motivations to do this are political. It's quite clear and apparent that the incumbent MSP that represents the area will find it far more difficult to be re-elected in a new proposed constituency going forward, and that's his main motivations for doing this, to quite frankly save his own political skin by doing this. So I think we need to get back on track and start informing people that this has nothing to do with the breakup of East Renfrewshire Council, but the fact that this is being discussed, that East Renfrewshire Council potentially could be broken up in this council meeting, I find unfortunate. It's got nothing to do with that. We need to keep the public properly informed on this issue. Thank you.
So, if everybody's had the... Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Donnell.
I'm a little bit disappointed that this debate has become quite political, when actually our first meeting with the three representatives of the leaders, actually we were very supportive and very thankful for the Chief Executive and Democratic Services for their work that they had done to create a statement which was clearly not political, it's very practical, and it was actually thinking about solutions as well. And it made no reference to any of the political comments that have been made here before. So I think we had made a lot of progress with that, thanks to Lorraine and Democratic Services for bringing that together. And I think they've prepared a very strong report that hopefully we can all still support. You know, I'm not sure anyone is saying that the report should be any different. I think we're disagreeing with our interpretation of risks and process, which is fine. We're entitled to have different views on that. But I think if we go back to the actual report, the intent and what we are trying to achieve on this, we were unified. I hope we continue to be unified on this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor O'Donnell. So the recommendation is for the Council to agree to submit the response in Appendix 1. Is that agreed?
Agreed.
Is there anybody otherwise minded? No. So unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Right, now on to the next item, which is item 15. It's the review of financial regulations. And this is a report by Margaret McCrossan, who's our Head of Accountancy and Chief Financial Officer, and the report is from pages 237 to 272. And are there any questions or comments on this? Councillor Morrison.
Thank you very much, Provost. It was really just two comments. Firstly, to welcome on paragraph 7, page 237, the additional measures which will be included, particularly around the need for accurate coding of expenditure, because that has such an important impact in terms of monitoring budgets and ensuring that costs are allocated to the correct place. But I would also like to take this opportunity to thank Barbara Clark, Margaret McCrossan and their team within accountancy for pulling together the unaudited accounts for the 22-23 year so quickly and in good time. We did discuss this at the last meeting of the Audit and Scrutiny Committee, and I'd just like to place on record my appreciation for all of the hard work again. Thank you.
Very much, Councillor Morrison. Are there any other points or questions? I think we would all agree with the phrase that you gave there, Councillor Morrison. So if there are no other comments or questions, can we agree that report?
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. On to item 16, which is a change to the scheme of delegation. Proper officer, report by Director of Business Operations and Partnerships, and the copy is attached. It starts from page 273 to 274. And again, are there any questions or comments on that? None indicated. Can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. And moving now to item 17, sports pitches, transfer project, report by Director of Education and Director of Environment. And I'm going to ask Lorraine McMillan to come in here. Thanks, Lorraine.
Thank you very much, Provost. It's just to remind elected members there, the Council's Code of Conduct is relatively complicated when it comes to membership of arm's length bodies. So just to remind councillors that they should declare an interest if they are on the board of the trust. However, they can still take part in the discussion, the decision, including any votes, but for the record, they should just declare that they are. It's quite a complex area of the Code of Conduct, and it was changed, as you'll remember, Mr Daly. A number of occasions, especially for councillors who have been here before, it was regarded as having a conflict, but now it's not. But I think it would be worth just noting the interest of those members who are here tonight who are actually on the board of the trust, if they could remind me who they are. So,
and call as well.
And call them as well. So if you've got the phone, call them, that'll be fine.
So could you just name them, please, Lorraine?
For the record, so it's Councillor Anderson, is it Councillor Edlin, the leader, and Councillor Merrick. And we can just note that in the minutes, but you can all continue to take part in the debate and vote if we do need to go to vote. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this report?
No.
None indicated. Can we agree the report? Agreed. Thank you. Moving on now to item 18, changes to organisational structure. And again, the report is before you. Are there any questions or comments on this item? Can we agree the report? Oh, sorry, Councillor O'Donnell.
In terms of the Appointments Committee for Business Operations and Performance, I propose that Convener, Provost and Deputy Leader, together with one member of the SNP Group and Conservative Group, form the Appointments Committee.
Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. So that concludes that item. We agree the report. Thank you. On to item number 19, the calendar of meetings. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you. And the last one now.
Exclusion of press and
Okay, I'm just going to ask you to speak to the... Sorry, Colin has flagged up an aspect of it that is worth noting, so I'll ask Colin to speak on the calendar of meetings item.
Just for clarity, members, there's two recommendations there on the calendar of meetings itself and the change of date to the September meeting of Council. I just want to make sure that was agreed as well. Thank you.
Okay, agreed. Thank you very much. So now on to item 20, which is the sale of housing.
So you're exempt, so the first thing you have to do is...
Yep, sorry, I'm going to go on to declare this next item exempt. So is it still on the calendar of meetings?
Yes, it is. It's just to say that on page 317, against Audit and Scrutiny Committee, it says meetings marked with an asterisk will start at 1 p.m, but there are no meetings marked with an asterisk. So I'm not sure if there should be an asterisk there or that text just shouldn't be there.
Okay, we're on to the last agenda item, and I will formally move the resolution to exclude the press and public as listed in the agenda. So are we agreed to that? Agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, so we'll just pause the recording and deal with this. Thank you. So whenever you're ready. Thank you very much. So having dealt with agenda item 20, that concludes the meeting tonight. Thank you very much for your attendance.
Well, thanks to the Chair.